Welcome. It is Wednesday, May 14th,
October, don't rush me, Dwight.
Right, exactly.
May 14th, 2025, and we are honored to have Reagan fellow, Reagan expert, Becky Norton Dunlop from Young America's Foundation. Take it away, guys.
Thank you, Dwight. And Becky, thank you so much for joining us. It's going to be really interesting. We have a lot to talk about, especially comparing what we're calling the first 100 days of the Trump administration and drawing some parallels to what was going on when Reagan was in office and how Trump has been drawing some inspiration from President Reagan. So it's going to be super exciting. Mark, I'll let you lead us off question-wise.
Well, I think somebody who I probably should have checked on this before I went on the air, but said that history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And I think that there's a lot to be said about that, of a lot of the lessons when you really dive into that Reagan first year in particular. There's a lot of parallels to draw between those two presidencies and sort of the disruption that took place, but also they're staking out an agenda, the separation, the differences between their agenda, the president's agenda, and sort of the traditional Republican agenda of that particular time. So, Becky, I thought it was great to be able to have you on to draw out those comparisons. But first, let me just lay it out for you up front: is how would you rate President Trump on his second first 100 days?
Well, I think he's just done a remarkable job. It's always a challenge to come to Washington, D.C., knowing that there's a deep state and a swamp and an establishment, and these all are going to be against you. But I think in the 4 years that President Trump had on the sidelines, he actually got much more strong in his principled ideas of what he wanted to do if he was elected again. And it is remarkable. We say history doesn't repeat itself, but remember when Ronald Reagan took office, communism was sweeping the world. Communists had control of Asia and Africa, and we had the Iron Curtain, and they were going into Latin America. And so, President Reagan came into office with one theme: make America great again. I've got the poster on my wall here. And he wanted to have rebuild the military so America would be strong, but he believed in peace through strength. We're hearing that again from President Trump. He wanted to restore economic growth in the country so Americans who wanted to work would have jobs available to them, and also that they could keep more of what they earned. So in that respect, there are lots of similarities. And I think that President Trump, during his time preparing for this term, knew very well that he would have to hit the ground running. He would have to be very aggressive, do as much as he could, as quickly as he could, and bring in people who were not part of the establishment or the swamp or the deep state. That's not to say there aren't good people in Washington, D.C. There aren't good federal employees, but you have to find them. They're like the needle in the haystack. And I think he wanted to come in with a team of really disruptors to be very aggressive and show the American people the government doesn't need to be as big as intrusive as it has become. And that, of course, was a Reagan theme. We have a much bigger government now, so there's much more to cut.
Yeah, absolutely. And have you found, I guess, I lost my question. No, I mean, I guess I would say, do you feel like if you were working in the Trump administration now, that it would have had a similar feel to it, right? With bringing in disruptors, with working at such a fast pace. Did you find things working that quickly under the Reagan years, or is this moving at something? A lot of people the pundits on Fox are saying we've never seen anything like this before.
Well, a lot of those pundits weren't born during the Reagan years. I would say for that time, we did move quickly. Keep in mind that the Democrats controlled the House of Representatives in those years, and they were very powerful. and they had been in control of the House of Representatives, and they did not want to let up their foot on the gas pedal of liberal policies very easily. The Republicans won control of the Senate, but I have to quickly say, not the conservatives. You know, we have a lot of times people who wear the Republican label, but they've never really read what the Republican Party stands for. And so they aren't in the fight for doing all of the things that need to be done. And their job is to do them and then communicate effectively to their constituents why they're doing it and how they're doing it and how the people will benefit. And I think President Trump has had his challenges along those lines in the Senate for sure. And with the narrow margin he has in the House, it's almost like dealing with a majority in the other party. Although I must say that I've been thankful that they've been able to do some very heroic things in the House with their slim margins.
Well, and you do make an amazing point. It is remarkable that these two presidents, Trump and Reagan, who, as you say, are the most conservative presidents we have, were both registered Democrats before they became Republicans.
Well, and, you know, President Reagan says the Democrat Party left him. He didn't leave the Democrat Party. And I think many of the people in the Democrat Party today, the grassroots, the people across the country who had been registered Democrats and maybe had been Democrats their entire life, finally connected during the first Trump administration, but then increasingly during the Biden years, and saying, well, we like that Trump agenda. Maybe we're not Democrats after all.
Well, it's interesting. Much has been made of the working class support that Trump has picked up, but there were clearly echoes of that in the Reagan coalition. We talked
Very
about
much
Reagan
so.
Democrats, people construction. I mean, the whole variety of people who traditionally at that point hadn't been thought of as being Republicans that he was able to bring into the party. But I wanted to kind of pivot in a particular issue where. One of the things I think sometimes is not as well understood as it could be about Reagan was just how masterful a negotiator he was. Now, we're kind of all familiar with Trump and the art of the deal and talking about his skills as a negotiator, and clearly that's something he's done for a good part of his life. That said, Reagan was also a very good negotiator, and I think he drew on his experience as a labor leader to be able to kind of get the best deal and work forward. And he had an ability, and I wanted to kind of ask you to focus on this. He had an ability to figure out what was central to his principles and what he could give ground on and where he could compromise. And I wondered if you could kind of elaborate as to how he navigated that particular equation.
Well, I think you're exactly right in pointing that out. I think one big interesting difference is the New York style of negotiating and the California style. And they're somewhat different, but both seem to be effective. But it is true that President Reagan did have, a lot to learn when he was elected to the position of the head of the union in California. He knew what he was getting into, and he'd grown up in the Midwest where the unions were strong, and he supported working people. That was undoubtedly clear, but he did not, all through his career, have a lot to say about the union leaders on the other side of the table who were opposing what the actual membership wanted. And I think Donald Trump has just seen right through that as well. But President Reagan had the view that if he was going to move the ball in a way that would allow him in the future to come back and move the ball further in the direction he wanted to go, he was willing to slow down his objectives. But if it was going to put a barrier in the way for where he eventually wanted to move policy, then he would not compromise on that. And, I think he was very effective. As we've said, he was dealing with Tip O'Neill as the Speaker of the House, but he did get a lot of very important legislation through by using that sort of technique of being an excellent negotiator, moving the ball along as he could always in the direction that he wanted to go.
Well, I feel like where Trump could really be channeling that right now is with his big, beautiful bill, right? With such a slim majority in the House, they're struggling. Mike Johnson is struggling to get everybody on board, because without everybody on board, it's not going to get through.
Well, I think you have an excellent point there. One of the challenges I think that President Trump has that Ronald Reagan effectively used was addressing the American people from the Oval Office. And as he sat behind that resolute desk and he looked into that camera and he talked to the American people about these issues. And basically he said, the only way we're going to accomplish this is if you speak to your people, you speak to your representatives. And Donald Trump does a fabulous job energizing his base with the rallies and so forth. But I do think that if he would take a step back and use that resolute desk and speak to the American people from the Oval Office, he has such a commanding presence. He communicates beautifully. And as the President of the United States, he ought to use the resources that he has there in the Oval Office and the command that he would have. All the channels, all the networks would have to cover him, or people would be turning their channels to the networks that were covering him. So I think that he has a great opportunity to get his big, beautiful bill passed. And I think it would move more quickly if he did speak directly to the American people and tell them some of the things that they're trying to get rid of that the federal government is doing to save money, and some of the things that the opposition just frankly is telling, giving out misinformation to be kind about it, about things that would happen.
That's a great point. There is a difference between them, which is that, and it may be a reflection, is it not, of kind of the polarization of politics? You were talking about the big, beautiful bill. The assumption, of course, is you're going to get all the Democrats on the other side, and the Republicans need to be a majority in order to get it through. Whereas Reagan had the opportunity to work with the Democrats who come from, at that time, from seats that have probably all long since become Republican seats. So they were the bull weevil Democrats who were more moderate or more even conservative, who provided him with that majority. That provided a kind of flexible dynamic that right now it's tougher because you're basically trying to create a coalition that's all Republicans voting without any expectation whatsoever that you can pull that many Democrats over.
Well, and I think one of the other things that has happened in the intervening years is Tip O'Neill, for all his loyalty as a hardcore Democrat party man, truly cared about America. And he did not run the caucus of the Democrat House of Representatives with the same iron fist that Nancy Pelosi employed. Mm-hmm. And, if you're a Democrat these days, it's very hard for you to vote against the leader because you never know what will happen to you. Bad things really have happened to a lot of people since the Clinton years, and nobody wants that to happen to them. So I think that the freedom to be an open-minded Democrat in the 1980s was more accessible to people on that side of the aisle than it is today, which is a great tragedy for our country.
Well, and I think even just the definition of Republican and Democrat have changed since then. I would argue that most of the people who were staunch Democrats in the Reagan era more than likely would be categorized as Republicans today, maybe moderate Republicans, but we've become so polarized as two parties that I think a lot of people aren't even connecting with the parties that were there in the 80s.
Well, I think to some extent that's true, but as the point was made earlier, that Ronald Reagan got a lot of the blue collar voters. I think he and Trump could effectively communicate to people in America who work for a living, who would be classified as blue collar, although who knows what that means anymore. I guess it means you don't have a master's degree or a PhD. But they both effectively communicated to that group of people, I really care that you have more money in your pocket to take care of your family, and the federal government has less money, and the federal government should do only what it's supposed to do and leave the rest to the states and to you, the people. And both Ronald Reagan, I think, effectively communicated that. And I think Donald Trump has been very effective in communicating that. I just think he needs to hone in on some of those districts where the people will support his agenda, even if their elected representative is not at this point in time.
So you've talked a little bit about President Reagan ceding things if he thought that it, or being a little bit lighter on things if he thought it would get him to where he needed to go. And I think we're seeing something really interesting like that happening with President Trump right now in his Middle East trip. So you have him lifting the sanctions on Syria, but still saying, hey guys, we need to get Saudi Arabia to sign the Abraham Accords. We need to normalize, what's going on in the Middle East. We need to get peace here, and Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. So things like his, meeting with the Syrian president, lifting the sanctions, and then also negotiating with Qatar, who is one of the largest, if not the largest state sponsor of terrorism. Do you think that that's ceding too much, or is that just the right amount to get to where we need to go? And it's fresh on my mind as somebody who is Jewish of Trump has always been a staunch supporter of Israel. Are we going to get to where we need to go on this route?
Well, I must say I'm a little nervous. But I do have an inclination to trust Trump. President Reagan had, in a sense, the same sentiment about China. He actually supported increasing trade with China because he believed that more we opened the Chinese markets, the more the people would have available to them, the more they would want to have, the more their economy would become a freer economy, and the people would then become freer. Well, it might have been moving in that direction as President Reagan had that inclination, but very quickly after he left office, that whole scenario changed. And when China was put into the WTO, then they began cheating with nothing happening to them. And so I hope that President Trump takes a lesson from that situation, that you can trust, but you must verify. And I think it's wonderful that the president has made clear, which I think President Reagan did in many instances, he wants every human being on the planet to have more freedom, more opportunity, job availability, markets so they can earn a living and have a growing economy and care for their families in the atmosphere of freedom. But you have to be very careful about these things, and you have to trust but verify. So I'm a little nervous, but I have trusted Trump so far, and I continue to do so.
It's interesting. One of the let me just try out an idea. It seems that when Reagan did a great job of communicating kind of a lodestar, of a North Star of what his principles were and the kind of direction that he wanted to take. And one of the things about Trump is we're become all familiar with his zigs and zags. We may know generally where he wants to go, but Monday things may seem to be going in one direction, and then by Thursday, it's and you realize that maybe this is part of the overall plan. It can be a little disconcerting sometimes, but I think, as you said, we kind of do get used to, okay, this is the mode of operation. This is the way it works. Maybe we don't like the zig on Monday, but by Thursday we'll see the method to the madness. What are your thoughts about that?
Comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Well, I will say that it was very easy to work for President Reagan because he did lay out as he was governor, and then of course his people helped shape the Republican platform of 1976 and 1980. I mean, these were the things that he believed in, and it was family, neighborhood, community, state, and then federal. It was the Constitution. And so it was very easy to work for President Reagan in that regard. I will say that I think Donald Trump's instincts are all pretty darn good, but he has not really articulated for the American people the principles on which those are based. It's more instinct. And like I said, I've trusted him so far, and he's proved to be right. And you do have that unnerving feeling some days when you hear something that he says, but then you think, well, you know, he's been right. He's been right on everything. So let's just go with him and you know, trust but verify.
Well, one of the things that it's sometimes, I think, easy to forget about those years. I'm looking at you, Jackie. You weren't there for them.
I remember it so well.
Right. No, what it was, I want to kind of point out is that when Reagan came in, you know, we had gone through détente. The expectation was that the Soviet Union would go on forever and ever. And the notion that, you know, communism could, or Russia, you know, the Soviet Union could collapse and that we could prevail the way we did in the Cold War was such a completely alien. I mean, it was thought to be just a wildly unrealistic. It was a source of great tension within the administration, within the Reagan administration, between those who kind of saw that was the lodestar, that was the direction in which we were going to drive policy, and then those who thought, well, no, this is completely unrealistic. You can't possibly accomplish what you're trying to do. Now, we look with the value of hindsight and think, oh my gosh, that wasn't such a bad idea after all. But at the time, it was a source of great tension within the administration.
Well, that is true. And, you know, one other thing that President Reagan had that I hope President Trump is able to develop is he had great allies in Margaret Thatcher and Pope John Paul II. They all had the same core principles, the same core values: family, faith, and freedom. And they were an amazing group of leaders who, there's no question that Ronald Reagan was the leader, but he had no problem talking with these two world leaders to talk about ideas and goals and, you know, what we wanted to accomplish to make the world a freer place for people to live in. And I fear that in the ensuing years after President Reagan left office, that our national leaders have, in a sense, allowed too many weak leaders to gain prominence elsewhere in the world, and we don't have that kind of a strong alliance with two key leaders. I hope that President Trump can develop that. Netanyahu seems to be one of those, but we really need to have President Trump have some allies in the world who will echo not only his policies, which they're actually beginning to do, you know, but also his leadership, his willingness to speak out and hold their government, deep states, accountable.
So thinking ahead to 4 years from now, when Trump inevitably leaves office for the final time, there is the possibility that we do not retain the White House. So what is that going to look like if there is an incoming Democrat administration, in terms of how quickly are they going to attempt to reverse everything that's being done now? Because it seems like even on the 90-10 issues, things like the men and women's sports, the Democrats are doubling, tripling down on being in that 10%.
Well, first of all, let me say we can't let that happen. But in the you know, knowing that you have to always think about what the potential is, I think this is one reason why President Trump is being so aggressive in these early days, and why he brought people into his senior posts who are equally aggressive. Now, they need to get legislation passed to put these things into law, although Joe Biden, the heck with law. I mean, he was definitely impeachable because he violated the Constitution and ignored laws on the books. So we always have that to fear if there's another president like a Joe Biden. But in the meantime, making sure we have strong governors. We have Glenn Youngkin here in Virginia now. Winsome Sears, our lieutenant governor, is running for governor. If she's able to win this race, which I believe she can win, she will be a strong voice for helping reinforce the principles that President Trump is advancing and communicate them effectively to the minority community, which is President Trump has done a remarkable job of doing also. So I think these incremental victories that we're having, not only on policy, but communicating effectively with the middle ground, if you will, the group of people out there that can be persuaded to go either way based on the circumstances of their life and the policy communication of the national government. If we're successful, I think that we will continue to have Republicans elected to high office. And in the meantime, I think about some of President Reagan's agenda, federalism. I mean, President Trump is turning as much over to the governors as he can. Well, turn it over to Republicans and Democrats. I mean, people in states get to elect their governors on education and so many of these things, block grants. Let's have strong governors and turn as much of the federal authority back to the states as the constitutional wanted us to do in the first place. Try to make sure that we are successful in these 4 years. And I think people then will realize they don't need such an enormous federal government running every aspect of their lives and taking a bunch of money out of their pocketbooks.
It does seem that that's one of the advantages that we perhaps have now, is we have the sort of the different federal system of being able to see how different states deal with the issue. So Jackie and I are in a blue state with a blue state governor, but we also see the experience that other states have in being able to advance the many issues, conservative, school choice, whatever, cutting taxes at the local level, that there really is a contrast that in the way the federal system operates that hopefully resonates as people look to decide where they want to live and which methods work best.
Yeah, we'll just be here crying into our tax bills.
What did you say, Jackie?
We'll just be here crying into our tax bills.
Well, even in states like Maryland, a broken clock is right twice a day. Isn't that what they say? So maybe your governor and your legislature can come up with some good ideas. I think as they see things like parental choice and education working in other states, and they see people moving to other states, that maybe they will, find that there's some benefit to some of these programs that actually provide people with greater freedom to run their own lives and more money in their pockets that they've earned.
Well, I think we're actually in Maryland, we're very beholden to the Trump administration in that DOGE and the mass exodus of federal employees from the state of Maryland might be our only hope over here.
Well, isn't DOGE exciting though? I mean, remember in the Reagan administration, it wasn't, in the first 100 days, but we had the commission, the Blue Ribbon Commission, that was supposed to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. And we didn't have an Elon Musk who was at the head of it, but we had a very effective group, a very effective team. They came up with really great ideas. Many of them were able to be implemented. And I think this is a good thing to have happen regularly, because deadwood happens and it's got to be cleared out.
Absolutely. And it's
bad
something
stuff happens. Bad stuff happens too.
And it's something that both sides have floated, because Clinton tried to do it as well. So this shouldn't be controversial, right? I mean, maybe they're uncomfortable. The Democrats are uncomfortable with the speed at which it's happening. And some Republicans too. I believe there was a vote to codify some of these DOGE cuts and they voted against it, Republicans in the House. Or no, it's the Senate. It's like 15 Republicans in the Senate voted against it. So it's one of those things that seems, it's like electorally unpopular, that people are afraid of the pace of change, that it's easier for them to say, well, we tried, and go back to their constituents and say, well, we tried, but they won't actually make it happen. Yeah.
Well, that's one reason why it's great that President Trump is moving quickly. I think that he has the backing of the American people now, the warp and woof of the American people. Yeah, AOC and Bernie Sanders are out there with their socialist agenda, and they'll get, 1,000 people to show up and cheer. Let's, take the money from the rich people and pass it out here. But that's not where most of the American people are. And I think the faster he moves, the more quickly he moves, the sooner he gets his team in place. There's still a lot of unfilled positions in the federal government. The Democrats are slow walking nominations through the Senate. As they slow walk nominations through the Senate, it makes it harder to get, the senior people, but lower level people from the cabinet and sub cabinet on board. And that's a goal of the Democrats. Slow all this down.
And it is a difficult process to get the nominations where it can take a long time. So it's important to be geared up to get those names out to the Senate, those that need to be confirmed,
Yeah.
those who can be appointed. It's difficult to do all that vetting to do it. And as you said, it's really surprising when you look at some of the agencies, how few, you may have a secretary in place, but how few people are
Right.
in place underneath that they're
Yeah.
really dealing directly with the traditional or the longstanding career people, and don't really have the support that they need.
That's exactly correct. No,
Yeah, because
you're
most of
exactly
these
right.
Senate appointees are not getting the, there were so many quote unquote controversial picks for the top secretary positions that all of those were being, live streamed, all of those hearings, whereas these lower down ones, people don't even realize that hasn't happened yet. They just assume that they're all in there.
No, that's exactly right. And we really have to keep the spotlight on the fact that the Democrats are slow walking. Very few nominees get through without 45 Democrats opposing them. And then you get the occasional Republican. I mean, people in the Republican Party who come up with a personal agenda to block a nominee. It's just, to me, shocking and disgusting. And but presidents should be able to get their teams in place, and then they will be judged every 4 years on how their team does. But if you don't have a team in place for 6 months or a year, how can it be a fair judgment?
Right. And then they tell you, well, he's not doing anything. See, he didn't do anything.
Well, one of the things that President Trump does so beautifully is he'll throw something out, and it's almost like tossing a piece of red meat into a group of wolves. I mean, the Democrats go at this, whatever he's thrown out there, and you just wonder how much good is he accomplishing when their focus is on that piece of red meat. So
it seems like that
they're getting a lot done.
That Qatar airplane might be the red meat right now because they were solely focused
on
that.
It is. I'm sure it is. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure it is.
He is the master of distraction.
Yeah. Well, the other thing to keep in mind, he takes this airplane from Qatar, and then, they talk about 130 Boeing planes have been ordered? I mean, Think of all the employees of Boeing and all the subcontractors and everyone who's going to benefit from the business deal that was done. And then we're going to get an airplane that the Defense Department's going to have to be able to go over with a fine tooth comb and turn it into an American resource.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree with you. I'll take the purchases of those Boeing planes over a delayed delivery somewhere down in the future. It's really
very
surprising.
Delayed. They're from the Obama years.
Yeah, it's how old this is. Yeah, it's a long-standing thing. I want to ask you, do you have any predictions? What should we be looking for in another 6 months? As somebody who's been through the sort of timeline of going through an administration, and each administration has their own kind of cycle. Right now we're at those, that first 100 days, or we just got past it, but where there's a lot of activity. What do you look for in terms of sort of what we should expect in say another year or another 6 months?
Well, I must say that I'm very hopeful that they will keep up a very rapid fire agenda here of executive orders, legislation, get this bill passed, show the American people you don't need all this big government spending to have a good life in the United States. You have to have a great communications team, and I think the president does have a good team right now. But the aggressive action has got to be maintained. Now, that doesn't always happen. It didn't always happen for us in the Reagan administration. But I think because he's got a team here that knows they only have 4 years, and they only have 2 years unless we win the House and Senate back, which I think we will. But you've got to get a lot done. You've got to get a lot moving. You've got to get a lot going that will not easily be able to be reversed. And you just need to move as fast as you can. And I think for that reason, we're going to have a very exciting time, and all those media outlets are going to have a lot to report.
Now, what's your take on, because this has been one of my favorite things so far, the new media seat in the White House briefings, in that they've captured, and I think this was Caroline Leavitt's brainchild, the fact that most people are no longer consuming their media from newspapers, from traditional television sources. It's on Twitter, it's through podcasts, it's on all other kinds of social media. And they're highlighting that, and they're saying, well, we should be getting the news to the people who are giving the news that people are consuming.
Absolutely. I think it is fabulous. The media always, the conventional media has always patted itself on its back, saying, we're irreplaceable. We're, the most important entity in town. We've got to be there. But I mean, I think we've shown even through the Biden years that they're really not interested in truth. They're interested in politics, and they were very good at their politics during the last 4 years. What the Trump team has done is they have recognized America is changing. The way people communicate is changing. The way people get their information is changing. And our job in the press room is not to serve the Washington Post and the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and the, Associated Press. Our job is to serve the American people and make sure that where they're consuming their news, those people have access to getting the information here at the White House. So I think it's commendable. I think it's just one of the areas where Trump has shown he thinks way ahead of what the average person in politics thinks.
Although there is an interesting point to be made. It's a lot like what Reagan did, where Reagan's speeches were a way of going over the heads of the then traditional media. Trump is not doing it with speeches, but is still doing it by using the tools of going over the head. It's obviously he's done that with Twitter or with Truth and with social media over the years.
Well, I think you're exactly right. And one of the interesting thing in his first address to the joint session of the Congress was how he enumerated some of the abuses that they'd uncovered in the federal government. This is what the American people need to hear. The more he can communicate that effectively, the more that they can show examples. I myself am for them gathering up all of the rescission dollars that they want to ask Congress to rescind and go up to Capitol Hill with piles of cash and say, this money isn't being spent. We've saved this money. We're still running the government effectively, and we're asking Congress today to give this back to you. In other words, I think the American people respond very positively when they know the truth. And that's what I think the Trump administration is doing effectively, is trying to get the truth out there.
Radical transparency is what they're calling it.
Exactly.
So, as we come to the last 5 minutes of our show, we like to give you an opportunity to plug whatever you have going on. Are you writing a book? Are you speaking somewhere? Where can people find you?
Well, you're great to do that. First of all, I love what you guys do. I think you're one of the outlets that helps people, not only in Maryland, but across the country who are watching this, get some understanding of what's going on in Washington and some of the challenges. I myself serve on some boards. The Association of American Educators is an old professional association for teachers. So if they want to be part of a professional association, but not in a union, they can join the AAE. And it's a great, great professional association. And I work for property rights on the board of American Stewards of Liberty, which is out there trying to make sure that property rights, which is an underlying foundational principle of freedom, is maintained and restored to the extent that it's been eroded in this country. I mean, these things are huge. And then, as you know, I'm on the Reagan Ranch Board of Governors. Young America's Foundation owns the Reagan Ranch, and it's privately owned, and we support it financially. It's important that we keep it privately owned so that it doesn't become woke by government entities owning it. And of course, Young America's Foundation trains up young people all across the country. They have college programs, high school programs, and now middle school programs, which is very, very important and wonderful. And then, of course, awesome. I'm active in Virginia. We have a great think tank here, the Virginia Institute for Public Policy, and we just love championing family, faith, and freedom. That's what my husband and I do regularly.
I love that. That's a great thing to end on. Mark, what else do we have to plug?
Well, we do have Pizza Politics coming up on Thursday, if I have the date right, June 5th. We'll be talking about voter integrity, and we'll be having one of the leading activists who's been pushing this issue very effectively, something that appropriately concerns people around the country. And we also, I'll stop there. That's another big event, but we also encourage people to sign up for our Substack. We've been putting out content just about every day, particularly Maryland focused, but on other issues as well. Jackie, you've got the YRs to talk about.
We always do. We've always got a lot going on. We just had our convention. We unanimously elected our leadership for the next 2 years, which is awesome. We also just rolled out our high dollar donor club called the Old Line Club. So if you're interested and have deep pockets with, 4 or 5 digit checks, reach out to me or anyone on my board. We're happy to take your money and we'll give you some.
Well, and I think it's very important that you promote that because, I have had a wonderful career. I've been very blessed, but it's time for young people like you to assume leadership positions, not only in the media like you're doing right here, but in government and in think tanks. And so it's really important for people who've been successful in our free enterprise system to invest in your organization and in young people like you.
Thank you. Yeah, that means a lot. Absolutely. We've got a lot of YRs gearing up to run next year. So we're excited to help them out. All right. Well, yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Well, I was going to say, thank you very much for joining us again, Becky. It's always a pleasure. And it's great to be able to make those historical comparisons between the Reagan years and the Trump years. So thank you for joining us.
And we're going to make America great again.
Woohoo.
Thank you all very much. Good night. Good night.
Let's go down to Masoni, where Italian cuisine shines. Let's go down to Masoni's, we'll have a good old time. Homemade pasta at Masoni's, sauces fresh and fine. Good friends gather at Masoni's. Join us anytime. Taste the pizza at Masoni's, the flavor so divine. Bring your good times, appetite. Join us anytime. Homemade ice cream at Masoni's, freshly churned.